Good day and hello, Mr. Pierce, and to the rest of our viewers and listeners. My name is, again, Rob Jardine, and we're here for episode 8 of The Learning Zone. Rob, a lot has happened since we last spoke. What's new on your side?
Rob, what's new on my side is that last week was bizarre and crazy altogether. You headed off to the Western Cape to run a number of different learning solutions for our clients there. You got sick, lost your voice. I got sick, thought I had COVID, and we didn't record, and we were down and out. But here we are trying again. Episode 8 was meant to be recorded last week, Tuesday, and go live, and now we are recording it today. So a week late. Apologies to all our listeners. I didn't think that I would have flu. Thankfully, I've tested multiple times. So anyone who's listening who knows me well and who may have seen me or, bumped into me over the last while, I am COVID negative and I'm carrying on and recovering slowly but surely. How about you, Rob?
Yeah, what's the saying there? Staying positive and testing negative. I think I've definitely been embodying that. I am embracing hybrid and virtual work. Both Rob and myself work virtually. So if you can work virtually, why would you want to work from Joburg or Johannesburg? So I've done a nice little stint down here with my partner in Cape Town. So we're here for about 3 weeks. Very excited, using the opportunity to do a few face-to-face meetings, including a really interesting meeting I had with an HR exec of a major consumer goods company. And then the very next day came down with a horrible flu that lasted about 8 days. And I think the biggest fear I had was to phone that HR exec and say, thanks for the first time meeting you. By the way, go get tested for positive for COVID. Thankfully, I am negative. I didn't have to have that awkward phone call. But that's just part of the new normal now. I feel a lot of social guilt around knowing and not knowing and who's getting infected. But at least we're both negative, but be down and out for a little while. But if we can get through 2020, I think we can get through anything at this point.
Exactly. And I think for those of you who prefer to watch our live recordings on YouTube, and that's your preferred mode of engaging with our content and what we share, Rob's got a really, really beautiful background, which has the 12 apostles and a beautiful image of Camp Space Trip, which I think he's been planning to get to over the last week, but he's been bedridden. And the irony is that, Rob, you've been down in Cape Town for 10 days and you haven't left your apartment once?
That's it, yes. A apartment here in Greenpoint in Cape Town. Haven't left once, and I can smell the ocean from my window, but I have not seen it in 8 days, despite being walking distance away. But that'll change soon. I think I'm just playing catch up now with work and also catch up with our podcast. So eager to get into this week's episode.
Brilliant. So basically this background for you then is aspirational. This is what completely you could be.
Visualization.
It's all visualization, which is actually a very key link into what we'll be covering today, part of our topic. Yeah, visualization and visioning, particularly goals and outcomes through a coaching approach, is something that we're quite keen to share and delve into further today.
Most definitely. And I was interested to see how you were going to make that link, but I think it's a bit tenuous at best, but I'm going to go with it. There's definitely a link there.
Look, I do what I can, Rob. I mean, I've been itching for you to get out of your bed and for us to record this. So yeah. now that you're available and I have the opportunity to actually record this with you, I'm pretty excited, trying to think out the box. We spoke about innovation in our previous episode 7. Innovation is not one of my strong points, but we know there's room for improvement, don't we?
We're all works in progress, Rob.
Thank you.
So when we get into coaching, and I think coaching is something that we're excited to talk about a little bit more on today's episode for 2 reasons. One, because in our enterprise where we work with large corporates, our coaching practice actually grew by about 200% last year, which was a big surprise. Or maybe not if you really think about it and understand coaching. And the second reason we want to talk about it is also because there's not a lot of shared understanding around coaching. Coaching is a very interesting profession for a lot of people. I think it's misunderstood for the lay person, and really what makes the difference between a good and a bad coach, and how can we adopt more coaching skills. I think I think I think the very first thing I'll mention is just that growth of the coaching practices that we offer coaching services for large corporates. And we saw a huge influx of people saying, I need a coach. I'm struggling. 2020 has turned my head and my world upside down. I'm rethinking a lot of things. I need a coach. I need someone to help me. And we saw a huge rise in that part of the business, which is not unsurprising, at both senior and executive level. And that makes us really focus on, what is a coach, and what is coaching in general.
Yeah, and Rob, the thing that's so fascinating about coaching is many people who have had the opportunity to be exposed to having a coach, or have been exposed to coaching altogether, have seen tremendous benefit. And I think it speaks a lot to for those of you who know the Johari window is, more often than not, we become very engrossed and immersed in our own thinking, in our own mind. And obviously in our last episode, we spoke about the importance of acknowledging your inner voice and is it serving you or not. But referencing that Johari window is, a coach is almost that mirror on the wall, helping you access your best thinking to solve the challenges that you're dealing with the most, either through feedback, and feedback that's supportive, it acknowledges where you're at now, but where you're trying to get to, and through you having a space to self-disclose some of your challenges. So, those two areas greatly grow your arena and enable you to think differently around things that you're struggling with. And sometimes through having a coach, you realize that some of the things that you're frustrated about, or you're aggrieved with, or the things that you feel are a problem in relation to what you're dealing with, aren't that big a problem, and that you possess, as we've said time and time again, almost all of the skills or assets to help you overcome them.
And I think that's really it. When you mention Johari's window, for a lot of people, that's really around reflecting your inner thinking, and that perception we put into the world, our goals and ambitions. And a coach is someone that is essentially a thinking partner that helps you improve thinking to develop a positive outcome. Put essentially, that's how we like to define coaching within our wider business. And put essentially, every athlete needs a coach. A coach is someone who is not necessarily someone that just gives you feedback in a traditional coach and athlete metaphor perspective, but they help you think in different ways. And they have the power of not being invested in the problem that you're facing because it's your problem. In the same way, they don't have the insight, and they're both a blessing and a curse, because they don't have the biases, they don't have the blind spots, and they have a way to ask the right kinds of questions to shift thinking. And a lot of people look to coaches when they have a difficult career decision to make, a difficult life choice. But it's also about improving your performance, getting a different person's perspective on performance to facilitate a better outcome, to help you catch blind spots, and to really help you improve your own thinking as a coachee. Because it's not about the problem at hand, it's about the thinking that helps you solve the problem. And if you are focusing on bolstering or improving your thinking, you're going to be able to solve any problem no matter what. There are definitely some problems that require a problem expert or a specialist, but the real value of a coach is a person that helps you build the capacity to solve anything. And that's really why people are shifting to coaches right now, because there are so many things to know. There are so many specific problems, specific solutions to look at, that people have to be almost change ready and not ready for a particular change. And that's one of the big benefits of working with a coach, and also developing a coaching skills in the way that you manage and lead people.
Yeah, Rob, and I think that's such a key piece, because we've we've recently been working, as you know, with a recently appointed chief executive, and it was interesting when we spoke to him about his request for coaching, and when we were putting forward some of our most sought after coaches, he asked, well, what is their track record, and what credibility do they have in relation to what it is that I need support with, and enabling me to be my best self. And, we often use the analogy that, do you think the person who coaches Usain Bolt, who's the fastest man in the planet, for those who don't know, and is a world phenomenon, do you think his coach is faster than him? No, he doesn't necessarily need to be that. But what he does do is make him aware of the things he needs to work upon to get that much better over time. And that's the analogy we use with this chief exec is, your coach isn't necessarily someone who needs to be better than you or needs to have a proven track record in your industry or in your sphere and context, but merely someone, as you said, who unlocks differing thinking. And I think the other point around coaching is that we've seen such a benefit in coaching as a competence across organizations, broadly speaking, not just in unlocking, as you say, the best thinking in individuals so that they reach their full potential, but also in, as a business, how you engage and interact with each other and how you service your customers or clients. We've had two major insurers now who've looked to develop not only their intermediaries and their financial advisors, but also their consultants around, when you are engaging with someone who has a particular need, you don't need to feel obliged to show your value and merit straight off the bat and tell them what to do. The way you show credibility and put your best foot forward is in making them aware of things they weren't necessarily aware of prior to you engaging with them, and making them aware of solutions that will make them that much better. From that point on, you've won their trust, and you've garnered a lot of credibility, and you've got an opportunity to do so much more. So coaching as a skill that we're touching on now, or as a superpower, has such a wide array of benefits. And I think if you acknowledge coaching as a superpower and as a skill set, not only as a leader, and as I said, we mentioned that leadership is not a position, it's actually a disposition. You will lead many different things in your life, but also as a way in which you engage with others in whatever sphere or facet. It really does help you, show immense value and credibility.
Yeah, Rob, I'm just reflecting on a lot of those knowledge bombs that you're just dropping there in that last little piece, and there's so many things that I want to pick up and run with, right? But one of at least the golden thread that I'm pulling out of what you're saying there is that you don't have to be an expert in something to be a coach, and often the best coaches aren't an expert in that particular field. And when you gave the example of Usain Bolt and his manager, I was thinking about, just in particular, obviously, as I've mentioned, unashamedly, I'm a Liverpool football club supporter. Some of the best football players aren't the best managers, and some of the best managers aren't the best football players. Our current world-class manager for Liverpool never made it out of the third division in his professional playing career, and some of the best and most famous managers never played properly. And that's one of the most common misconceptions around coaching versus managing as well that I really want to get into. So coaching is a confusing discipline. It's a confusing industry, mainly because you can do a 2-year course and be a coach through a university, or you can do a 2-day course on the weekend in someone's home and also be a coach. And there's varying degrees of quality. But the real essence of it is it's someone that can help you think differently. And because it's so subjective and interpretive, there's various degrees to this industry as well. And there's a lot of good coaches out there, and there's a lot of, I would say, not as good coaches. And there's a need to make a distinction. What's also important to notice is that outside of finding a coach, you have to find someone that works for you, that you have chemistry with, that you can gel with. I mean, they don't always have to have the highest qualifications. If you believe you can resonate with them and their pearls of wisdom will land right, you as a coachee also need to be ready to be coached as well, because those
Yeah.
pearls of wisdom are going to fall on deaf ears if you aren't ready to change and do the time to change yourself. So that's just one thing on coachee preparedness. But as leaders, a lot of leaders right now are also shifting to try and bring coaching skills into ways they lead people. And I think that's something that I want to focus on, is how do we shift from a transactional, traditional managerial approach in how we interact with our teams and others, to shifting to employing more of a coaching approach that builds capacity, improves decision making, and improves problem solving in ourselves and others. And it's really best exemplified by the example of saying, if someone brings a problem to your table, how do you solve it? And for many people, if someone brings a problem to the table, I'm going to try focus on the problem, think how I would solve it, and then tell the person how I would solve it. And that's generally managerial life, right? I get promoted on how well I solve problems. Now I become a manager, a senior manager, and a director. And when someone brings me a problem who's below me in an organization, I'll say, listen, youngster, here's how I solved it 2 years ago. Here's how you do it. You're welcome. I'm the boss, right? I'm being facetious. There's not many organizations that talk in those such black and white terms, but I think we get the gist of it. The problem is now so much of the world is changing. I mean, you have directors and managers that are trying to manage and coach their employees and people below them. And sometimes they're using technology that the employees are more familiar with than the manager. Sometimes the people below the leaders in an organization know more about certain pieces of technology or ways of work than the leaders do. And how do you manage that disconnect? And what we're seeing is that there's a huge benefit there for applying coaching skills, because a coaching skill is not about focusing on the problem on the table, but it's about focusing on the thinking that sits behind the problem. So if I'm just telling you how to fix something, when you bring it to my table, you're always going to bring a problem to my table. However, if I'm focusing on how your thinking can solve that, I'm helping you build that capacity to solve that problem and more problems in the future, because I'm improving your thinking that sits behind it. And that's a key differentiation between managing, mentoring, telling you how to solve, and shifting to a coaching approach, which is more around creating an environment to ask the right coaching questions, to shift thinking and improve thinking, so that you can build capacity in the future. And eventually, employees might solve things on their own without much of a reliance on the manager.
Yeah, Rob, that's such a great explanation of the difference. And I think what we've seen now during the last 18 months, and we've touched on this on previous episodes too. So have a listen in around, what happens in the brain when we threaten, particularly in times of significant change, is that leaders are trying to juggle so many different balls right now and are trying to prioritize multiple things. And what happens in lieu of that is that when someone comes to you with a problem, you want to solve it quickly. And your inherent or instinctive response is tell the person the answer, get it done, and move on swiftly. And in actual fact, over time, what that does is it fosters, disengagement. It fosters further, employees being demotivated and not very fulfilled in the work that they do. Whereas when you focus, as you've just said, on the thinking and enabling the person to solve that solution themselves through the way you question and the way you interrogate and you find out what it is that they are doing currently, they feel much more empowered, much more focused, and much more driven to go ahead and do it in the future. And as you say, you're creating capacity not only for yourself as a leader, but for them too. And the one thing I always mention, and it's very simple, but it's very, very true, is some of the best leaders in the world, and those that are widely regarded in whatever realm as being great leaders, are the ones who fundamentally are able to step out of their role, and their subordinates or their team can fill that space with the drop of a hat. And many people define really astute leadership as where your subordinates or your direct reports or those beneath you within the organizational structures with which you work could take your role tomorrow. That's the sign of really strong leadership. And I think that links very closely to what you've just said now around focusing on the thinking and not giving people the solution to the problem straight off the bat as a leader, but making them aware of the solutions themselves through the questions that you pose.
Yeah, I think that's really hitting the nail on the head around not giving the solution straight away. And it actually makes me think of a quote of one of our more prominent coaches within our network that we make use of, her coaching services. And she said something to us in one of the last webinars where she said, being a coach means learning to be lazy. And I thought, that doesn't sound like a high performance individual. And I know her quite well. She's a very high powered coach, been coaching for 30 years, knows her stuff full time, like not someone who's just been coaching for a couple months or even a couple years. I mean, 3 decades. And she said it's learning to be lazy. And I've started applying that in my team that I'm involved with, especially when a problem is presented to me and I do know what I want to say. I do know how to solve the problem. I always stop. Because that's our natural go-to is say, here's how to solve it, on to the next one, don't have time for this. As I often say, hold on, what would you do around it? How would you solve this? And even if I know that the answer is obvious, perhaps in my mind, I give the opportunity for the employee or the person I'm working with to think about it themselves, to practice, to have that safe space, because that's building the capability in them to solve problems in the future. And I must give a caveat, though, that you can't always ask that question, how do you think you would solve it? If, for example, someone phones me and says, where's that button on the website to unmute myself? I'm not going to say to them, it's not in the bottom left-hand corner. Where do you think it is? I'm not going to say that, because sometimes you need to be told where something is. It's not every situation, but I think maybe the biggest takeaway that I'm kind of leading to here is know when to coach, know when to manage. Know when to learn to be lazy, know when to give the solution straight away, and know when there's opportunities to improve people's thinking and to practice and to try.
Yeah, those are such valuable tips, Rob. And it's amazing, when we engaging with clients, I'm often having to catch myself as soon as I hear a need arise that I go, oh, geez, we can solve that solution for them straight off the bat. And it's very easy for me to respond to that. I often have to remind myself to probe further and ask, those visioning type questions which get them to a solution where they go, through the question that's just been posed, I now have a view of what it could be. Once they've uncovered what that solution is, I can then position how we as a business can support them. So, I'm often very conscious of not wanting to throw a solution, straight down their throat, but rather keep questioning and listening attentively and asking those vision-based questions. If you were to succeed, what would that look like in your context? And if you were to really define your objectives and what you're prioritizing now, how would those priorities enable you to achieve your overarching objectives? Start framing them so they're getting a view of what the end result looks like. And whilst we get further down that road, they're starting to generate insights around what they could do. And then I'm closer once I've shared my solution to hitting the nail on the head. Similarly, it's the same with all of our staff. And we're lucky enough to have very close relationships with our business in the Neuro Leadership Institute. We only have 20 staff, but when, I'm more often than not having to catch myself when I get a phone call from an employee or for someone we work with to go, they've asked for support and something, to go straight down the line of, this is what you need to do. I've got a call in 30 minutes. I'll go, rather, let's have a chat about this a bit later. I think this is very important that we have a sit down conversation, or we have an MS Teams or Zoom call, and let's explore how we go about solving this, rather than me wanting to quickly tick a box and move on. And I think being conscious of taking time to support people in a coaching approach, as you just said rightly, when it makes sense to coach, we better primed and better positioned to support people in any shape or form to achieve their goals.
Yeah, and I think almost moving towards experimenting or closing here, I was just reflecting on what is the one thing, what is the one question or one coaching question that I always go to. And I must be honest, it's mine that you probably hear 2 or 3 times a day, at least in important conversations, is I say, what does good look like here? And it's something that I picked up from one of my most admired leaders that I used to work for in Germany. And she used to say, what does good look like here? And as soon as you ask that question, all the detail and drama of this clashing with this, and then this timeline, and this stakeholder, and then this law, and this can't be done. As soon as you ask the question, what does good look like? It shifts you to that level of vision. It shifts you to that level of not getting involved in the drama and the detail, not being led by bias and emotion. And it focuses on the common ground of what everyone is aiming towards. And there's a fun bit of neuroscience around that, is that particularly when the brain has limited capacity or we have a running deadline, it's cognitively harder to think about the vision and the abstract stuff because it's cognitively harder to hold in our minds. So we gravitate towards the nitty-gritty detail and the roadblocks and the obstacles because those are easy, they're concrete, they're finite, they're easier to understand. And the abstract is harder, and that's often that secret sauce that elevates the conversation where we can see, above the weeds, and we're able to really solve and focus on the thinking of our thinking. So my sort of, key takeaway that I'd like to leave everyone with today is really to focus on asking yourself the question when you're getting up, when you're about to embark on a complex challenge or a decision, or any kind of thing where you want to almost self-coach or reflect on your own thinking, is to really interrogate the question, what does good look like here?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think, we could talk about this topic for hours because we're very passionate about it. And as you say, it's something we're dealing with on a daily basis because the coaching arm of our business, fortunately enough, has been the most successful, as many organizations prioritize not only skilling leaders as coaches, but, prioritizing coaching altogether across the business at an exec level. So we'll definitely do another one on this in the future. And as we get into our leader series, bring in one of our top exec coaches to share some of the real finite elements around what makes a good coach and some key tips that you can use within your leadership. And when I talk of leadership in any facet of your life, leading whatever it may be, using coaching as a means of, helping people reach their full potential. So thanks.
Thanks, Rob. And just a quick plug out for our leadership series. We are quite excited to get it going. We obviously have a wide network of leadership executives from around Africa at the moment that we can easily plug into. And we don't just want to focus on your, executive leadership, corporates, athletes, as it were, or people that are just in that field, but we're also trying to stretch ourselves further. And I'm very pleased to say that we actually met a lovely gentleman who is a former Olympian and the founder of the Jamaican bobsled team, Devin Harris, just last week, and he's very excited to collaborate and have him on our next show as well. So excited to keep on pushing, as he says, or Devin Harris, the founder of the Jamaican bobsled team, Olympian, soldier, and now motivational speaker. So plenty more, including him and many others in the future. Looking forward to taking it to the next step of the learning zone.
Cheers, everyone.
Goodbye for now.